Hey everybody, it's Dominic here from the Break It Down show, and today's guest is Morgan Lerette. He worked for Blackwater for 18 months, from 2004 to 2005. Upon his return to the United States, he completed his undergraduate degree at Northern Arizona University and was commissioned as a U.S. Army intelligence officer. From 2009 to 2010, Lerette deployed back to Iraq. He left the Army as a captain, moved to Boston, and attended the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. He received a Master of International Business degree in International Banking and Finance. He wrote the just-released book, Welcome to Blackwater. The book is published by a veterans nonprofit, Onward Press, and all sales contribute to its mission to help veterans get their stories published. While we are talking about veterans, you already know what to do. Go to savethebrave.org and support these veterans. We fight together PTSD. If you want to support our show, go to the PayPal link, put a little money in it, and all the money goes straight back to the show. So check out our website, breakitdownshow.com. You can find our merch there, or you can simply subscribe. All right, enough of me. Here comes Morgan Lerette.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick
This
Marotta.
is Stuart Copeland. This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Scott Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Morgan Lerette, and you're listening to the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, we're live, trying something new here at Bastards, and we have Scott Huesing sitting here in the studio with us. What up, Scott?
What's up? We are at Bastards American Canteen in Temecula, California.
Yeah, and then we've got Morgan Lerette here with us. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, it's cool. It's cool to be here and cool to be able to talk with you, and cool to try to set up with the mobile setup here. It took about half an hour to get going, and hopefully the wireless holds up. But tell us about your book, and then we'll dive right in. Grab that thing and hold it up for the camera.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote the book Welcome to Blackwater, which is about my time as a modern-day mercenary over in Iraq working for the infamous Blackwater Security Services Company in Iraq 04-05. And it was just the heyday of contractors where we didn't have a whole lot of adult supervision. And we just kind of did what we needed to get the mission done. So it's a wild ride of a book that kind of gives you insight of what the PMC world is.
PMC is private military contractor.
That is correct.
That's correct. Yes, my vast vernacular of jargon and acronyms does not escape me. But I read this book like even before it came out. You sent me the copy of it. I read it in a day. So again, as far as testimonials go, Pete, I mean, the minute I read this, okay, so the company that published this, they reached out to me and says, hey, I want you to take a look at this thing. This is a Tuesday. I get the copy in PDF. By Thursday evening, I call and says, hey, who's this fucking guy, Morgan Lerette? Because I want to talk to him. Because this book is just blown my fucking mind. For a couple of reasons, and we've talked about this because we've had a few hangs even before we had Morgan on the show over in Scottsdale and Phoenix. But the fact too that I was in Baghdad in 04. When did you get over there?
August 04.
Okay, August of 04. So I think we were there at the same time because I left in September. So we crossed paths. We didn't hang out. We were probably eating in the DFAC at the same time.
Oh yeah, that's where I got my dysentery.
What's DFAC stand for the viewers?
Jesus,
Dining facility.
Dining facility, yes.
It's not DFAC. Yeah. It's not even an acronym.
It's just like PULIES, the acronym PULIES, and the S stands for psychological. I'm not lying.
What's PULIES?
Pulmonary, upper, lower hearing, eyes, ears, that kind of thing. And then S. It's psychological. S.
So anyway, that's how Morgan and I got connected. And this book. Okay. You can talk about it, but I want to share my perspective on it because, again, I read this book in one day, and for me, that is a feat because I have short attention span in theater, lesser degree than yours, which I've come to find out. But the book is so raw. It is so unvarnished, and just here's the thing for anybody that has not picked up a copy of Welcome to Blackwater. Go to Amazon today and get this book. It's called Welcome to Blackwater. And it is the most fast-paced book I have read in a long time, and that's why I kind of fell in love with it. I was like, man, I got to talk to this author. But in addition to giving this unscathed, unvarnished viewpoint, as a guy that was Air Force, kind of this kid that didn't like to follow fucking orders, and then you're like, I'm gonna get out, and then you join this contracting where you're like, I'll try my hand at this. So you're like Nick, the fucking new guy. And you get thrust into this world of contracting. But in addition to that, we're going to talk about this more, about the dialogue, the way this book, the beat of this book for the readers that want to get a copy is just, it's fucking hilarious. I mean, it's tipped into with this dark humor of war that is inescapable in what you've written. But the humorous aspects of it is something that any veteran listening to this show, anyone that served in that soup sandwich of the modern day version of the Star Wars fucking cantina in Baghdad.
Oh my God.
Is, as you know, there's like private contractors to, 4-star generals. So when Pete says like, yeah, there was, or who said adult supervision? Like there was a fuck ton of adult supervision over there, but they didn't give a fuck. It was the outset of the war. We're in year 3 and they're just jamming out. What was it like for you to go from the Air Force into this community of PMCs, especially Blackwater? They were at the top tier.
Oh yeah.
They were the fucking Green Berets of contractors in their own eyes.
Yeah, that's true.
For the most part, there's a lot more Green Berets. No slight on Green Berets. We love them. But what was that like, that transition?
So going from the Air Force, like we went into the ground offensive, and then the ground offensive like went north of us, right? So like I got my combat experience, but when you join the military, like you're trained to fight, and you're like, man, I want to get my combat on, and then you get your chance in 2003. You're like, I'm gonna get my combat on, and then the war went so fast up north, like nothing happened. So we were at Tolil Air Base, and I sat there and I watched like planes land for 30, 45 days, whatever the hell it was, and then my buddy got into Blackwater, and they literally walked into the room and said, hey, we need dudes. Like, you have any dudes that are like good in the pocket? He said, yeah, call my buddy Morgan. So I just got this random call. The only thing I knew about Blackwater was the Fallujah incident in 04. And I was like, hey, why the hell not? So I'm thrust into this like alpha male, tough guy training environment over at Blackwater, and I'm just quiet.
And you're like 22 years old, right?
Yeah, 23. Yeah,
23.
Yeah. I'm like this little tiny baby, and this guy's like, oh, I'm a SEAL, and I was in Dev Group, and I was a Green Beret, and I was Air Force Security Forces. And then once you like go through the process of proving yourself, you like the world's your oyster. But I just had to keep my mouth shut, learn from as many people as I possibly could. But it was like the most competitive thing you've ever seen. Like everything from when you're sitting at Moyoc and somebody goes up and does like 20 pull-ups, and the next guy does like 24 pull-ups, and the next guy does like 35 pull-ups, and it's like, no, I'm just going to do my 6, and then I'm going to jam out because like I don't really feel like doing a whole bunch of pull-ups because I don't know what the hell.
And Moyoc is a shit town in North Carolina, just over the Virginia border.
Oh yeah, no, it's a dump. Yeah, and it was hot and disgusting.
Yeah,
but you're literally like,
which is the Blackwater Training Academy.
It is, yeah, yeah. Which is now under Constellus and Academy and all that other stuff. But I mean, the facilities were spectacular, but the people that you meet were just total characters, and that's really what I started thinking about writing the book. Was like, this is like the funniest thing I've ever done in my life. And then you throw that on the backdrop of war, and you throw it with like all these guys that are trying to bang everybody over at the pool that they can. And it's like, this is something that people haven't seen. When you hear Blackwater, it's either, oh, they're patriots and they all deserve ticker tape parades, or the politicians. Go ahead. Hello. And then the politicians are like, oh, Blackwater mercenaries, and they all should be in jail. So it was like this very polarized thing. And when I started writing the book, I just wanted to give that raw ground perspective of what a contractor was doing, how we operated, and the people that actually did it. So really kind of humanize the PMCs. Like, we weren't just knuckle draggers.
I mean, when you get through like the whole training around all these high speed, low drag dudes, and there's punctuated with every branch service, and there's a boatload of Marines in there as well, because they were actively recruiting our guys from Fast Company in the palace to just cross deck right over.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was nuts. We were so in demand. I mean, was it like a typical hazing fest, or did you feel like you had to earn your stripes and, you know, like, oh, I want to, because the way it's written, like, I don't mean that, like, you could give a fuck what these guys thought.
No, and I couldn't, but I also was smart enough to keep my mouth shut. So everybody would come in talking, oh, I was a ranger and I was a, you know, force recon, and then you don't realize that everybody's like sitting next to you has an entire network, and people are getting called out. Oh, you were a ranger instructor. Oh yeah, you went through
You did from your Air Force Special Force Security Forces tab.
I did. I was like, look, I was Air Force SF. No, man, I kept my mouth shut, and then people started seeing, you know, I could shoot, you know, shoot, move, and communicate. They were like, okay, this guy isn't that bad.
So this is an important annotation for like people in the modern combat world. One is everybody's throwing their resume around, and those are the guys that don't have the confidence to shut up and just chill. You know, it's like, yeah, I taught at SWIC for years, or whatever it's going to be, right? And the folks that have done stuff typically don't talk about that. You don't know that if you haven't done stuff, and so you talk a lot. How did you have the savvy to shut up and just chill out? Because the less you say in that case, and if you shoot, move, and communicate, run fast, work hard, you're gonna get in just by not being a pain in the ass.
Oh, dude, it's straight up prison rules. Like you go, you find the biggest guy in the yard, you suck his dick, right? No, but it is like prison. Like
some guys fight that guy.
I think it
put his dick in your mouth.
I think that is because you punch him in the face.
Yeah, you know.
Again, we're talking about Air Force.
Yeah.
So, and you know, this is a sibling rivalry we have. Like, you know, the Air Force is really kind of the closest thing to being a civilian in the military that is. I mean, even the Air Force, like, yeah, it's
And we have the smartest
pretty
folks,
chill,
person for person. Like you guys are educated. I mean,
well, they're top heavy though. The pilots are. I mean, the ground, they're all smart. I mean, we have the best trained, smartest, well-educated military on the planet.
and then Air Force, they don't call them leaders; they call them managers, right?
Oh, do they? I have no idea. I mean,
I call them leaders.
I got in '99, so but you know back
Case
then.
manager for your section.
We all just called each other by our first names. It was like, hey, Dan. Dan's like my
pretty
E7.
relaxed.
Yeah, like girls can wear earrings, and you can have a ponytail if you're a girl. If you're a guy, you can have a ponytail too now, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, ultimately, it's hair.
Yeah. So like when I got to Blackwater, it was literally like prison rules. The first guy that comes up to you and says hi and wants to be your friend is the guy that doesn't have any fucking friends. So like, don't talk to that guy because he's going to be a turd. And I was just knowing that in advance. I was like, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. If people want to come up and talk, hey, great. But I'm just going to be like, yeah, I was in the Air Force.
How long is the training down there? Or was it? It's a few weeks, right?
Yeah, it was back then. It was 3 weeks. I've heard it's up to like 3 to 4 months now. But yeah, it was 3 weeks. So the first thing you do is you go in there, you do your PT test, which is nothing. It's like a 1.5-mile run, pull-ups, push-ups, sit-ups, and then you do a dummy drag, and then you start with your SF-86. And that's where we lost everybody, because people that are willing to go over into a combat zone without like the legal ramifications of being under like the DOD are not that good at making life decisions, myself included.
And SF-86 is for everybody to know. It's just the background investigation. Like if you're going to have a clearance or whatever, they run you through this thing. And so if you've married from Nogales, that's fine, but it impacts your ability to go do things overseas.
Yeah. No, I divorced my Mexican stripper before I got over.
That's wise.
But yeah, so exactly. It was like credit card debt. People just weren't getting clearances. Credit card debt. Couldn't tell you where they were for the last 10 years, lived off the grid. Yeah. So like I was 23 years old, clean cut kid, all American boy. I walked into my psych eval and my SF-86 interview and they're like, have you ever done drugs? Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. You know, I smoked weed in high school.
Not everybody, even in the military, has to get an SF-86, by the way. This is a very detailed background check about the size of the LA fucking phone book. And they go back and they say, oh, yeah, we talked to Mrs. Phillips, your third grade teacher, and she said you were a troublemaker. May or may not be a disqualifier, but they spend a lot of money on that because you have to hire all these resources. So Blackwater was doing the right thing to, you know, as a way to mitigate risk for the people they employed. And what's more important is, so you go through all this training, and at the time, in Baghdad, the situation was it was at this strange stage during the war where Baghdad itself had started boiling over. There were pockets of resistance. Fallujah was really bad at the time. Ramadi was really bad at the time. And all of the influx of leadership was in Baghdad at the Coalition Provisional Authority, which was run by L. Paul Bremer, who was the envoy for George W. Bush. He was running the show over there. He always wore a business suit and his tan boots. He looked all, campy and whatever. He was a man of the people or whatever, the troops. But it really was an interesting dynamic because the influx of security contractors, at least from a standpoint of the military, they became this tool for diplomacy almost to a point. I think we've talked about this and kind of agree on it, is this tool of plausible deniability. Yeah, because there were a lot of soldiers and Marines and in the area and in and around that were doing things that were, I don't know if they fell outside of the rules of engagement of these things. By having this huge, almost civilian army, it gave the U.S. diplomatic structure a way to say, oh, those weren't American soldiers, those were contractors, and we fired them, and they've been moved on, because everybody was intermixed. There was contractors, there was Marines, there was soldiers, and everybody was floating around the battlefield, and especially in Baghdad at the time in 2004, which was really kind of under attack in certain pockets, and you kind of came in at the tail end. But I remember being there at the early 2004, all that, the Texas wall, those huge concrete barriers, all the Jersey barriers, the smaller concrete. I mean, we should have bought stock in concrete.
Oh yeah.
None of that was there. All of that was being set in place by these dudes who were flown in from America and everywhere else to run the cranes and build this massive wall around Baghdad in the green zone, which wasn't necessarily the safe zone. They just called it the green zone because we still had rocket attacks. We still had, RPG attacks and all these things. And then the contractors rolled in there. When you landed at BIOP, what were you thinking going back there?
I was thinking, what in the flying hell did I get myself into? So when you fly into BIOP in 2004, we corkscrew in, right? So if you're coming in all normal, that's like a tasty treat for an RPG. So you corkscrew in, and then at the very last second, you go ahead and you level out and you land. Well, the Blackwater pilots took great pride in not telling anybody when they were going to start their corkscrew. So I'm sitting there with my laptop on my lap, and I'm playing Minesweeper or something stupid on there, and all of a sudden we start corkscrewing, and I'm thinking, dude, we're going down. We are dead, absolutely dead. And then we level off, and I was like, oh, thank God I wasn't the guy that stood up and screamed like a bitch, because all these tough guys behind me, whatever. And then we get off the plane, dude, that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, okay, good. Well, at least everybody was scared to death, but none of us wanted to be the bitch.
Yeah.
I want to just, because it's important to say this, when you fly in, all of a sudden the plane starts porpoising, right? Everybody's like, okay, I know what a porpoise is. And then you do that hard, triple cyclone descent, basically trying to put this gigantic plane on the ground as fast as possible. Yeah. And then when you get in the actual descent, they're just and you land. Really, sometimes you float a little bit and then land, but it is insane. 45 seconds.
Oh no, it was crazy. And then they drop us in. They tell us, don't worry. They drop us in. We're going to have armored vehicles for you. They pick us up in a Peugeot that doesn't have any. The windows were already broken out, and they had welded some armor on the side. And I was like, dude, I'm dead. That's just all there is to it. And at the time, Route Irish was being bombed every dang day.
This is another important thing, because when you get there, I don't know how long it was for you, but you put that left foot on the ground, you're like, I'm in Iraq. Yeah. And then pretty quick after that, you hear an explosion somewhere. Could be us, could be them. And if you're not there long enough to understand what us and them is, you're just like, that's an explosion. Yep. And then boom, and then boom, and then boom. Guys like Scott are giggling, calling in fire missions and everything. Yeah. Dropping JDAMs on people. And you're just like, that's not far from here. It's not on top of your head, but explosions nonstop.
Oh no, that's absolutely nonstop. And once we got into the green zone, they they put us in like this big circus tent, and we got rocketed, I think, either that night or the night after, and it was close to where you could feel your body like kind of like your muscles seize up and like you lose your breath. And I was like, oh shit, like this is real. Like this is really real. And to your point earlier, 2004 was when we went from having Paul Bremer running the country to giving Iraq sovereignty. So what that did is it turned it from a DOD mission into a Department of State mission. And that was the biggest mistake of the war. You look at Germany, we were in Germany from 1945 and we didn't give them sovereignty until like the 70s. Like, what the fuck? And then in Iraq, oh, we're going to do it in 18 months. So then now it's a diplomatic mission. You got to get all your diplomats out. Well, who the heck's going to protect them? Well, the Department of State didn't have enough people to protect them. So that's where the contracts started coming in.
They did have enough people for salsa night and the pool.
They did.
Oh yeah. Well, what's interesting too about our mission over there from the FAST company, which is Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team, which is an elite group within the Marine Corps that does anti-terrorism. We've done a site survey over there, and they were about to pull out of the CPA because they kept getting attacked. And they're like, "Who do you guys belong to?" And one of the platoon commanders is over there says, "Oh, we work for the Navy. So if you want to talk to us, you got to talk to the Fleet Admiral for Fifth Fleet to request this." And the next thing you know, within a year, we had 3 FAST platoons over there, these highly trained anti-terrorism Marines running missions, and we actually worked with Blackwater. I mean, who's our friend that wrote the book?
Frank Gallagher.
Frank Gallagher. Yeah. So Frank Gallagher was running ops over there. We worked with Blackwater Air. We sent saw gunners up. We did, guys who were shooting mortars at us and stuff. We'd send Marines up in the Little Birds, and it was some sexy shit.
Yeah.
And they needed it because they needed the manpower. So it was just an interesting dynamic. But jump the tracks. What were we talking about just now?
Well, and nobody knew what anybody else was doing, which right? So you have the army that's out there, and then we're just like flying through the streets in these Suburbans, and we're trying to pass Big Army, and Big Army's getting pissed off that we're trying to pass them. Big Army's trying to pass us, and it was like nobody had a clue what was happening in their operating space. And as a contractor, I was like, "This is badass! Like, I don't have to ask permission for anything."
We were talking about diplomatic mission.
Yeah,
and so OPS. Mobile security debt is over there from State Department, so they're integrating and running certain DV VIP missions around. You're running VIP missions around. Everybody who thought there was somebody could pay Blackwater too and have them provide security, and then also the government contracts are rolling in. So that was one of the most interesting things too. Insulting to the guys that were over there on active duty. How much money were you guys making daily, tax free?
So we were making $500 a day, and then a 10% bonus at the end. That's when I started. We needed people so bad by the time I left that I was making $600 a day with a 10% bonus, so $660 a day. And then I was a team leader, so I was making right around $700.
So you're kind of a junior man on the totem pole. So a guy that's a team leader or even up a couple, they're making like $1,000 to $1,200 a day.
Yeah, some people in the head shed were definitely making that. Yeah. And they weren't even rolling out, those cocksuckers.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, it's one thing to make $700 a day and go run actual PSD.
And you guys were over there for 3 months, basically at a pop, and they'd rotate, right? Wasn't it the normal rotation cycle?
So that's how it started, and then people kept popping smoke after 3 months, so they turned it into a 6-month contract. Yeah. So my contract was at least 3 months, and then I could get
day on, stay on too, right? Like you're getting paid by the day.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I don't like to do math in public, but $1,000 a day for 30 days. I mean, you do the math. I mean, you're rolling out of there for 3 months. You're making a year's salary. And then you go back home, chill out. Most of the contractors, where did they go? Like Africa or Germany. They'd take their little time off. They'd blow a lot of their money. Like,
oh yeah,
boop, back in the chute. Yeah, go back, crush another $100,000.
Yeah, they're like, we're going to Prague. I'm going to buy 17 hookers. I'm going to come back and tell everybody the cool hooker stories, which I have a lot of cool hooker stories in the book. Because those guys loved them some hookers. Amsterdam was the hot spot, going back and going back home and then going back to Iraq. But yeah, you go home, like, dude, I'm an idiot. I bought a Land Rover. I got home, blew like half my stash on a Land Rover. And then I'm looking at my bank account and I'm like, well, got to go back now. So then I just went back for another 3-month pump.
Did you, I know you talk about this in the book, but I mean, tell everybody listen, like what your what your thought was after that first deployment. I mean, you blow the cash, but did you want to go back?
I did, yeah. So my intent was like, I'm going to go back I was going to work it for a year. And this is how everybody starts, right? Like, I'm going to do my first contract and then we'll see. And then it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it for a year and then we'll see. And like it's intoxicating because like the military people treat you like you're some kind of god, like you're some kind of special operations guy. You're in the Little Bird, you got a beard, you got long hair, got my John Deere hat on, looking good as fuck, flying around. So it's like intoxicating. And I think that war in itself is intoxicating for a lot of young people. You don't want to be there necessarily. And then when you get home, you miss it.
Yeah.
So the contractor just allowed you to be able to go back whenever you wanted. So you could come home for 3 months. You could come home for 3 days and then you could just jump right back over.
Yeah.
And then you make all this cash and you come home and you're like, I'm king shit of Turd Hill. And everybody's like, no, you still have to stand in line to get your milk, bro. Like, you can't cut in line because you have a diplomatic passport to get your laundry washed. And I'm like, fuck that! I should be able to get in the front of this line. I want my laundry washed now. So you just I came home just a complete asshole. Like I came home with this big ego, this tough guy thing, and in the long term, it really didn't work out for me all that well. But at the time, I was like you're the king, man. Like you just feel awesome.
I mean. And put it in perspective, 23 years old. 23 years old. You're surrounded by a lot of senior guys. And then, again, the Coalition Provisional Authority, it's like a crazy high school, man, with all these different classes from freshmen to, the upperclassmen. And it was like the Star Wars canteen is the best way to describe it. Anywhere from full military dress to business casual to this fucko walking around with a beard and a John Deere hat on and an automatic weapon. And it's insane. And there's females, there's female contractors, there's local nationals, there's Iraqi citizens, there's the sandbag crews who are Indians and Iraqis that would come in. It was just cats sleeping with dogs. I mean, it was every day, and that's where I lived, in the bowels of that building, in the basement where the septic overflowed and filled the floors for 10 months. And you guys were just like on the outside of one of the compounds. Or did you live in the cans?
Yeah,
so little trailers that we called cans.
Yeah, when we first got there, they put us behind the pool, which wasn't good because we would just go buy a bunch of booze and then we'd go to the pool and we would just like take the thing over and just get wasted. And they call the MPs and the MPs would be like, "Okay, you guys got to calm down."
Yeah.
Like, who's the bitch that's like calling us out here? Like, who is it? Oh, well, General whatever.
There was like the guy's like there was like the sergeant major who's from the 423rd, Army Reserve Regiment back in like Kansas, and like that's his job is to maintain good order and discipline. So he's the guy like, "No, you're not allowed to walk on the grass," or you curfews at 10 o'clock because these contractors, they're not military, so they really didn't have to listen to anybody. And for the Marines, that we secured the whole perimeter. We had guys on the post, DMs. We did patrols. We did the biop runs. We did DV. We established the embassy as part of our mission. We worked with Blackwater. But we looked at these guys and we're like, God, they are loose cannons. They were, dude, the pool was anything from a Daytona spring break party.
Yeah.
Every weekend, pretty much most nights. And we couldn't drink.
Right.
We couldn't fraternize. It was just, we're Marines, we just things we don't do. But these guys, no holds barred.
I want to say this too, and I know, Morgan, you'll appreciate this. That general or that sergeant major, if you were there at the right time, you'd catch him at the biop duty free buying liquor.
Oh, yeah.
And so they'd be like, look, like, "Hey, what's up? I know who you are, Sergeant Major." And then you're like, "Yeah, hi, all right." And like a flatbed full of liquor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a sergeant major. So there was like a sort of an unwritten contract. Like, if you don't say anything, I'm going to leave you alone, but don't expect me to cover for you. But, because people are buying hundreds and hundreds of dollars of booze and passing it around.
Well, in the green zone, so we had our own Suburbans. We could just jump in and drive around whenever we wanted. And they had like these little beer stands on every corner. You'd go and you just buy like 2-3 cases of beer. You'd head over to the pool. You start cracking those things open. I made a beer bong out of one of those big water bottles and a fire extinguisher hose. So we had like a beer bong night out there at the pool. And just like, if you were a girl at that pool, you just had the pick of the litter. It was like, oh, this contractor, ooh, I like his abs better tonight. I'm going to go and I'm going to take him home. And people are like fist fighting over these girls that I'm like, dude, back home, she might be a 3. The old, I call them war pigs, overseas beauty queens, like just hideous beasts. But they're like, I'm going to have, ooh, I want that one.
Yeah, if you subscribe to political correctness,
Don't read this book.
you may be slightly offended by some of the language in Welcome to Blackwater. I found it realistic because that's the way people talk, and it may be changing with the political landscape as it is now, but that was how they talk. And again, they didn't really have to follow any military rules of protocol, but there wasn't. There was some probably crime that was committed in Baghdad and other cities, and I'm sure there was some sexual assaults that happened. I think there were reports of that. I mean, there was a stabbing back there. I think it was a local national stabbed some soldier. There was all kinds of weird shit that happened in that place. It was a very, very chaotic little nucleus of, because you had so many different cultures jammed into this one little tiny space. And then, by the way, Blackwater wasn't the only contractor there. There was all kinds of variants from Frosh Soft to JV to varsity. So if Blackwater's varsity, you have all these other guys who are like, oh, I'm going to get in the contracting game, and they fly these guys over there, and they cost less, so they got a bargain. I mean, can you imagine that? Bargain security. And I think we've all seen it. Like, there's Brinks, they're pretty responsible, and then you've got these other companies. But I remember this one time we were out on patrol, just patrolling around the palace, which was Saddam's old palace, the CPA. And we hear this round go off, and just we're driving by, and it's one of the contractor compounds, and I don't know who it was, Triple Canopy or Aegis or someone. It wasn't Blackwater, but it was this guy getting ready to go on patrol, and he's got a M240 machine gun, 7.62, and he's loading a thing and has a negligent discharge. He basically puts his finger on the trigger, and boom, the barrel's elevated, thankfully, and we pull in, and we're kind of like playing sheriff that day. We're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? He goes, oh, yeah, I had a fucking AD. I said, there's nothing accidental about that, dude. He goes, it's no big deal. It just went straight into the air. I go, that bullet's going to land somewhere. I go, it could have been in someone's head, someone's house. I said, what the fuck, man? And this kid, he was probably, again, one of those guys, man, who might have been in my platoon 6 months before the Army or whatever. But now they get sucked up by one of these contract companies, and the level of training that they have is not equivalent to that of the military at the time. It just wasn't, man.
No, it wasn't.
That's the kind of shit that, you go into such great detail in the book too about, there's a lot of jocularity and humor, but it's all wrapped around the tension of having to do such high risk missions because, hey, yeah, the money's great. You're free balling over there. You've got all this liberty, but it's still Baghdad in 04. And this is just at the time that everybody who's listening to the show or watching knows that in 04, 05, this is when the insurgents figured out, hey, you know what? We're not going to go toe-to-toe with these guys, but you know what we're really good at? Planting bombs in the road. Yeah, we can blow up their vehicles. And this is before our vehicles were really armored. The military, we would sandbag the floors. We had guys cutting steel doors, and it's 110. You can't even set your arm on the door. These guys all had at least had up armored Humvees, or they had some Humvees, and then they had Suburbans.
Yeah, we had the armored Suburbans.
But it was a real tipping point in the war where, at the time, again in 2004, we drove as fast as we could. That was the TTP, like drive fast, you won't get blown up, because they were all using remote. And then I go back 2 years later, and my deployment to Ramadi, and it's drive slow as you can go, because everything is pressure plate. Yeah, you roll over it, and it blows up.
Yeah.
So it was.
Well, and it was the time in the war where it went. 04 is really when it went from like hey, they're here, they've kind of like helped us, and now we're going to be free from this oppression of Saddam Hussein, to fuck these guys. Like they're not saying that much. And then the Shias started taking power. So that's when you talk about Fallujah, Ramadi, that's Sunni Triangle. They got pissed off. They're like, well, we're just going to start blowing shit up. The Shias were like, oh, cool. Well, we're going to have kill squads, because Bremer decided that anything that Saddam had taken for like the last 30, 40 years should be given back to whoever he took it from. So the Shias were like, hey, I want my house back. And they're like, dude, I've lived here for 40 years. Like, I've raised my family here. And they're like, oh, cool. I'm just going to bring my kill squad and I'm going to slaughter you. So all those Sunnis left Baghdad and they started that insurgency in the Sunni Triangle. And the Shias were just running roughshod over the government, over everything. And the Kurds were like, hey, we'll just let them keep fighting. Just don't come up here to Kirkuk, because we got oil.
And you got a guy like Bush and Bremer, these, thinking they're going to create these political puppets and put them in place. And it was Alawi.
Yeah.
Alawi was. I actually have that guy's ID card in my studio at my ranch.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, because we made those. We issued all the IDs, but he was the guy that went out, and he was a pretty brave guy. He was this short, dumpy little dude, is an Iraqi, but he was a leader. He was put in place by Bush and Bremer to really lead and bring those two cultures together, Sunnis and Shias, which, again, we infused ourselves into this civil war, and we wondered, why the fuck aren't we winning? Well, one, we never figured out what is winning. I mean, we're still there. I mean, this is 16 years later, dude, and we still have troops in Iraq, and we never cracked the code on that. And and there's still contractors over there.
There's more contractors than
there's probably more
military at this point.
Yeah, probably more. Yeah, more contractors than military at this point. And I think the last time I checked was about 2,500 troops, like uniformed troops that were over there. And then we got others in the region. But the book itself, too, man, it covers a short time span of your youth, transition from the Air Force, being thrust into this culture, and the perils of driving the roads and all the humor. When did you figure out, I'm going to write this book? Because I just like, one of the things I was really keen on when I read this book was how you write, just the dialogue and the beat, the way it's written. And when did you figure that out? Like, after you digested all this, you've been through all these experiences, and I don't want to give away the end of the book too, because it doesn't end the way you think it's going to. But I'm not going to say if it's a tragic or happy ending, but I'm saying, when did you figure out, like, I'm a writer? Like, I'm gonna write this. I have this skill to do this.
So I just started writing out the stories because you're sitting there and you're bullshitting with your friends, and they're like, dude, there's no way that that's true. There's no way that that's accurate. And I was like, but you can usually tell when somebody's full of crap, because if they tell you the same story once and then you bring it up, they'll be like, oh, but like, if they keep telling you the same stories, they're like, oh crap, like that might have actually really happened. That guy might have actually gotten really drunk, grabbed an AC unit, and jumped off the high dive in the pool. Like, that may have happened. I'm like, no, it did. Like, that's how Baghdad was back then. So I started writing it like in just the little stories. So it started off as almost like Tucker Max's I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell. Like, here's a story. And then I gave it to a friend of a friend who's a screenwriter, and he's like, you have a voice. And I was like, I don't even know what the hell that means. He's like, you just keep writing. Just keep writing this thing. And that's really, it transitioned from like a bunch of little stories into an actual kind of timeline. So it really starts with me landing in Baghdad, and then going through like the whole process and the emotions of war. Like, you have friends that die, and how do you cope with that? But at the same time, like, it's the funniest thing that you've ever been through, because in order to cope with something, you sit there and you joke about it and you laugh about it, and it's completely irreverent for like most civilians, as we like to call them. But I really just wanted to tell the story of like that guy on the ground. Like, how did he feel? How did I get through it? Like, physically, emotionally, like you name it.
Who did you want to tell the story to?
I don't know. I wish I had thought it through. I'm just not intelligent enough to be like, oh my God, I have to think this through. Like, I didn't outline anything. I just went on it.
Let me put a pin in that right now. I'm not as smart as it, because he plays a caveman on TV. But where did you go to school?
I went to Tufts University. The snootiest
But that story that you're telling, it's complex. So the timeline part, I get that. Like you have to do something to draw the thread through. But there's the actual danger. I mean, April 2004, they grabbed 4 contractors and burn them and hang them from a bridge.
Yep.
And start off an entire, problem over in Fallujah. Yeah, we were in Baghdad trying to get up north to Mosul, and the army's like, "Why don't you drive?" And that's great, that's cute, but like in a Toyota Land Cruiser, okay, but and it was just entirely too dangerous. And so all of these things are happening where you're trying to figure out what the hell your job is day to day, how to do it well. There's never enough contractors, right? And so the guys that come in, a lot of them were like, "Hey, we're cops, and I don't want to be a cop right now. I want to go make some of this money." And so that person qualified in some areas, but otherwise you don't know. And then you can find yourself on a patrol where you get into a shootout, and all of a sudden everybody spends the next 15 years in court because of this impossible combat situation that everybody's going to judge in the rearview mirror because you're contractors, you're mercenaries. But the reality is you don't know day to day what's going to happen. I mean, a mortar does come in and it does hit something. Could be you, could be your friend. Your friend can be so crazy from being deployed that when he goes home, he ends up driving his motorcycle into the back of a truck or whatever, and he dies. I mean, all these things happen. It's a party atmosphere in a lot of ways, but it's also a horrible humanity atmosphere where there's just death and destruction all around you, and uncertainty, and life is short, and money is big.
Yeah, and you just have to distance yourself from it. And it's hard to distance yourself from when that rocket hits. So we had a rocket hit our tent. So this was the only place you could go on MySpace and like cruise for chicks was this tent. And a rocket hit, and thank God they were using the wrong fuses on it so it didn't blow up. But it was like 15, 20 people that are sitting in this tent, and it comes through the top, it embeds into the ground, and I'm standing next to a dude, and this didn't even make the book, but I'm standing next to this dude, and he goes, "Fuck, there goes our internet." And you're like, that's your first thought? Like, these guys are probably dead, and you're like, "Oh man, like there goes our internet. I'm not going to be able to get on MySpace."
Well, I want to get back to who you wrote the book for too. I think a lot of Americans need to read this as we continue to fight wars, we continue to go over and we do things. How private contractors. There's been movies made about this, about privatization of our military and how they're viewed. I mean, obviously, you changed some of the names in the book. Blackwater and its former CEO and founder Eric Prince, who is Navy SEAL, did not support or endorse this book.
No,
you've gotten a lot of fuck you emails, probably all caps emails about what you wrote because they feel that you violated their trust in the sanctity of the Brotherhood of Blackwater. And I can get that, when you have loyalty to an organization, loyalty to guys you fought with. But as I'm reading through this, and I have a keen perspective because I was there. I was there at the same time you were. I worked with all these guys. I knew some of them. I served with some of the guys that were in Blackwater when they were on active duty. So I have a very unique perspective. But I appreciated that you told it like it was. You have to get a copy of this book because when he uses certain words and language in the book, one in particular, mercenary, there's really no other synonym for what the fuck contractors do over there of that caliber. You're paid to do bad things that we're not, the military, we aren't allowed to do. I mean, there is an absolute plausible deniability. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head when you use that language. I think it was really powerful, but you also are, I read through it. So I think a lot of the haters that may have reached out to you probably didn't read the whole book. No, I don't think they really got the subtext either of the book because there's also this compassion that you have for the people that you're fighting amongst. You have compassion for the people that are struggling with the things they're seeing over there. I mean, you could even read into the compassion of the guy that's got to, go to the bathroom in someone else's cooler. It's like, man, this is a horrible situation. Like, can you imagine being there? Everyone's been there, but no one's ever been deprived of certain things. And you kind of highlight that in every chapter of the book. I mean, in addition to how you are geared. Talk a little bit about your dad and because I think it's important, man. It talks about the kind of guy that has the metal, the way your dad raised you and everything you did. I mean, you go back home with your girlfriend, and it's there's a great personal part of that. And I love that you, as a writer, and you may say, "Oh, I was just writing stories," but you really shared a part of yourself that came through. Talk about that.
Yeah, so when I started writing it, I was talking about Saddam Hussein. There's a book out there called "I Was Saddam's Son." It's about Uday Hussein's body double, and I read that, and the stuff that those guys did was absolutely horrible. It's like, yeah, we brought in this lady, we raped her, we beat her with an electric cord and all that. So when I first started writing, I was like, I'm glad we got rid of Saddam Hussein, although my dad could use a little Saddam Hussein slap and tickle. And my publisher was like, well, you need to actually get into that a little bit. Like, why does your dad deserve to have like Saddam Hussein just absolutely annihilate him? So the story in the book, which was the funniest of the stories that I could come up with for my dad, was I go and I see my dad, and he wasn't really in my life very much. So I just grew up tough with my grandparents, who was like a Dust Bolt Okie, toughened me up. And I knock on my dad's door, and he lives in just like this ghetto part of Phoenix, and he's missing his front tooth. And we go in there, and he's like smoking cigarettes, and he's like pouring beer. The guy wakes up and like just starts pouring Key Light, over ice, so he can just get his buzz on as early as possible. And we're talking, and I was like, somehow we were talking about Billy Joel, and I was like, well, Billy Joel's gay, and he's like, Billy Joel's not gay, and I was like, dude, Billy Joel's gay, because I thought I was thinking Elton John. He's like, Billy Joel is not gay. And I was like, dude, who cares if he's gay? Like, what does it matter? Like Crocodile Rock fucking makes me want to dance, bro. And he gets so mad, he socks me in the mouth right in front of my girlfriend. And then I said, hey, Dad, why don't you just grab that cigarette, stick it where that tooth used to be, and you can smoke it there. And he's like, you fucking cunt, I'm going to beat your ass. And I was like, all right, well, hey, it's time to go. I'm going to take off here. So we're walking out. My dad's like at his front door, and his girlfriend's like trying to pull him back. And he's like, oh, the best part of you ran down your mom's leg at birth. You fucking bitch. You don't deserve to have my last name. And I was like, huh, maybe I should put that in the book. But like everybody has a story like that. The guys that are in special operations are just tough kids that had grew up tough. Yeah. And then they get into the military, and they're like, dude, I remember basic training. People were crying. Yeah. I was like, what are you? Like, why are you crying? Like, this is awful. Like, you just wake up, you run a little bit, then you get to eat, and then you march around. Like, I don't get it.
I like that you put that in there, because for me, having spent 24 years in the military, it really is, I don't know if it's been written or not, someone's PhD or thesis on why kids from broken homes are so instinctively drawn to the military. Obviously, it's a big family. The military create structure and things that you're lacking in your life. But how many guys, Pete, I mean, we've done hundreds of veterans on podcasts. I mean, people that have struggled through life, had tough family situations, like Ryan Hendrickson, like Remy Adeleke, Boone Cutler, like all these guys, like me, come from broken homes, some sort of trauma. Then you're like thrust into the military, and it just, I don't know, it makes you a better person. I think it balances you out.
It can.
It can also fuck you up a little more, depending on, I think, too, depending on the type of leadership you have in your military experience. I mean, there are cases where someone who's, 19, 20 years old, who grows up 18 years of abuse or shitty upbringing, has a series of bad leaders, and that only compounds the problem.
Right.
I was lucky that I had some good ones, but I also had some shitty ones, like everybody.
Yeah.
That's a share, dude, that a lot of people aren't willing to do when they start barfing a year or two of their life. And you go into more, and you include some of your family stuff in there on the back end too. But I think that's a tough thing to do. I mean, when you got pushed into that, was that a tough decision?
I wanted to keep it as far off as I could, and to your point, I don't want to give like the ending of the book, but I had to be able to put like that. I turned out okay. Like this whole thing, like you can almost watch me evolve into like this young naive kid, and then I turn into like super duper asshole. Like I should wear a cape and it should say like asshole on the front, and I should be able to fly around like just spitting on people. So at the end of the book, I had to kind of open up and say, look, I turned out all right. Like, yeah, I got divorced. Yeah, but I found the love of my life, which actually turns out to be my dog. So it's difficult to kind of put yourself out there. But in order to make a story authentic, you have to. So kind of back to what you were saying earlier, people were pissed off. A lot of people, like the nasty emails I get is because I literally put mercenaries on the cover.
Yeah.
And people are like, we weren't mercenaries. We were contracted by the State Department. And I was like, look, you could have raised your hand and went back over there as an E4 or an E5, and you didn't because you were chasing the cash.
There's some words in the English vernacular that you just can't replace, like a pirate. Like, what's another word for a pirate? I mean, if you're a pirate, like you're a pirate. Like, there's really not another better word, the more subtle word. If you're a mercenary, if you're getting paid to do violence and protect and guard for money, like I don't know. Maybe I need to pull out.
And what do you call a company that's like, hey, let's not pay Americans. Let's go get guys from Fiji or guys from Sri Lanka or guys from Uganda to do the same work and pay them pennies. You know, like, what's that guy?
That guy is the former head of Blackwater. Like Jordanian guards. Yeah. I talk about the Jordanian guards like having sex on post with each other, and like to your point, it was just like
you were talking about it earlier, like the fucking diving board with an air conditioner. You cannot make this stuff up. When you read this book, Welcome to Blackwater, you will say, "There's no fucking way that happened." Well,
it did.
I'm telling you, man. I witnessed all the things that happened. That's why I'm like tearing through page after page after page. And one day I read this book, and I'm thinking, all of this shit happened. This guy has not missed a beat. But again, you know, the book's not just all of these college pranky hijinks. You know, you share a little bit of yourself. You know, it's tipped in with this dark humor that I think really is emblematic of what a lot of people went through. And there really isn't a civilian component written. I know Frank wrote his book. I've read parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing. This is at a different level, though, because, you know, Frank was kind of Bremer's right-hand man. You know, he's walking around his 511 gear and cool, you know, Oakley sunglasses, walking Bremer kilos and stuff. But Frank's got a story. But I think from a ground perspective, a guy that was doing it, that also served his country, you've got a good balance. I think that's in there, man. I mean, I honestly, I've shared this story with a ton of people who
you were so stoked when you told me about it.
No, I may have had a couple scotches in me, but I was like that with everybody. Like when I called Dan Maher and I was like, dude, you got to read this. The next morning he wakes up, he's like, I'm on the shitter right now, which is typical for Donnie O'Malley. He's like, I just read the first 2 chapters. This is amazing. And like, I mean, which is interesting because Morgan loves to throw a potty humor and Donnie, like, that's his whole thing. But he's also a super smart dude who served in the Marines and in combat. But there's so many people out there that love this book, not just within our community. I really think that this book's going to have a long life. I mean, even looking back, and I think what's interesting too is what you've written in the book. And I don't know if you can see it, Pete, right here. Oops.
There you go.
Is if you haven't gotten a copy of this book, the next wars we fight, if our leadership in the military or at the diplomatic level have the balls to read this book and understand what was going on with our contract component through this book, they're going to have a second thought. They're going to have another real hard look at how we employ contractors in combat situations, or even what they're doing now.
Let me just say this about contracting too, because I've been a contractor, and it's become a bad word in the military and outside of that. You and I both know, Scott, you know this as well too. The military and the pick a fight, they don't have enough capacity to fight with. Yeah. So someone has to go do hard work, driving around in a war zone in soft or up armored vehicles where people are getting shot and blown up. That is not easy work. So someone has to do that. Not all contractors do that. Some contractors, like me, I would do intel operations. Maybe I left camp, maybe I didn't. But that doesn't make me any less of a person than the person who handles logistics. because the Army and the military can't handle that. There's a lot of people working on a problem that the government created, and they don't have and we don't want the million-man army to handle all these things. We have a smaller army, so we have to privatize some of this stuff. But we also have to hold those people who are going to deploy folks accountable, because it's expensive. It's expensive. It's not cheap. It's hard on lives, and it breaks people decades later. Like, you go work for Blackwater for 5 years and come back and your body's destroyed. Who do you go to for a claim? Because you don't. You don't.
Yeah. There's no support system for contractors, and thankfully a lot of them are prior service, so they still have the VA. But we have a suicide rate that's probably far exceeds what the military is per capita, because people come back, like, you've lived that life so long, and you come back and you're thinking, now I got to figure out how to live this new life that I haven't really experienced. And some people just can't get out. They can't get out of that lifestyle. And I mean, these are people that are married, they have kids, and they just come to a point where they say, you know, I'm going to take the final out. I'm going to start this Glock.
Yeah. And do you still have? Is there still? I've never asked you this question. Is there some sort of connective tissue that you have with guys that you contracted with, or is there a stronger ligament between the guys in the Air Force you're with, or is it both?
So from the Army, I still have some really good friends from the Army. I have really good friends from Blackwater still. Just great people. And the ones that I've sent this to that worked with me were like, dude, you nailed it on the head. The people that didn't work with me are like, oh my God, you're such a butthole. I can't believe you broke our code of silent professionals. And I was like, silent professionals? Eric Prince wrote a book. Derek Frank?
Dick Marchenko broke that code in the 80s.
Yeah. So these are people. So here's what happens. In the military, you deploy as a unit, you come back as a unit, and you have all your friends there. And then after 2 or 3 months, that's when people kind of start moving over to different units. They get redeployed to other locations. As a contractor, you get home and it's just you. There might be one contractor, maybe two in the area, but even then, it's like, you know, you have your own life. It's just you. And I think the National Guard goes through that to a certain extent, because they come home and they say, okay, now go back. You're now a grocery bagger, even though you were like an E7 over there. So I think that is what really that support system. Aside from like Facebook, there is no support system for contractors. You hope you explain it to your wife.
Is there a contractor Facebook page?
There is. It's like these middle-aged guys. They're like, I'm offended because Morgan didn't get that story right in the book, and then
write your own damn story.
That's what I keep saying. I say, look, it's wrong. I'm willing to change it.
Johnny Walker had that happen to him too. Like, you're telling our story wrong. Like, well, fucking tell it. Yeah. Tell your story. Go write 16,000 words, put them together, get them edited, get it on and on. You're not going to do it.
Shut up. I hear the same thing, guys. You were in Ramadi with me at the time. When they're like, you need to talk about 1/6. Like, I'm like, well, like I was 2/4. Like, write a book about what 1/6 is. Like, you guys are 1/6 hard. Like, that's a great title for a book, 1/6 hard or something. I don't know. Yeah, you can't write about everybody, and at the end of the day, you're never going to make everyone happy. But this book, man, is, I'm going to say, for the year of COVID, 2020, probably one of my favorite reads. From something I absolutely can relate to, having been there, having known these guys, everything that you put into this book, man, is just it's great. It's a great read.
I've had people tell me I haven't read a book since high school, and they're in their 30s, and they're like, I've read that in 3 days, which is like the highest compliment.
Yeah,
because there's nothing worse. Like, I've tried to trudge through some of these war books, like Bill Gates' book is terrible. He's like, and then I went to Walter Reed, and this guy had his arm blown off, and I was able to pat him on the shoulder, and I was like, where's the emotion in that?
Bill Gates.
Yeah.
You wrote
No, Robert Gates. It's Robert Gates. It's just he be the same. Like, there's no emotion in these books, right? Like he should do this guy, like, you could see the pain on his face, but he was happy that I was it was just like, and then strategically we move these people here and it's like, dude, that sucks.
Yeah.
Like give me the real story. I would rather hear about Marine in Okinawa and what he did, even if he only made it 15 feet onto the beach and sat in a bunker, over here in the general. It was like, I hit on this in the book. The generals are sitting there trying to run a war from the comfort of a palace. and they don't get out. They have no idea what the hell's going on.
That's as timeless as word itself.
And then after 1 year, they're like, "Oh man, we did really good out there."
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, but you all lost.
yeah.
Hey, everybody who wants to get the book, there's the link right there on the screen. It's called Blackwater Mercenaries. Welcome to Blackwater Mercenaries, Money, and Mayhem in Iraq.
Where do you, real quick, what do you got coming up next? What are you working on now? Writing still?
Yeah, so I'm about halfway through my second book, and it goes back to the veteran suicide thing. So what I've realized with a lot of the veteran suicide, and I'm sure you guys can attest to this, is that it's not the combat experience that ultimately drives somebody to commit suicide. There's a lot of variables that happen after combat. So, you're getting divorced, your kids hate your guts. All these things, and they all kind of come together, and it's odd to me that people like me can make it out and be okay, and then other people that I think are stronger, harder, tougher than I am couldn't, and they end up committing suicide. So the book is really revolving around like one incident that happens in Afghanistan, and following these characters before it, and then following the characters after, and trying to figure out which one is going to like take that final out, and which one's going to take that experience and be able to get better about it. So it's a little bit deeper, but still, I still gonna have fart jokes and stuff because that's how I roll.
Well, where do people find you? I know they can find you on TikTok because you're huge on TikTok.
TikTok.
Where else do they find you?
I'm on Instagram at Welcome to Blackwater. Those are my two main platforms. If you want an autographed copy, you just go to welcometoblackwater.com. I'll sign it up. I'll write you something pretty. See, in this one, I wrote to Pete and I said, "Hey, looking forward to working with you. Enjoy the book. Every surprise after scratching your ass. So I'll write you.
Very deep stuff.
And then I'll drop your dick in it. So if you've ever deployed and you went to those porta potties in Iraq, it's like full of like biggest breasted women and dicks and we saved your ass in Ramadi in 2004. Oh, you guys, I was banging your wife when you were out deployed. Like so, I try to be authentic though.
One of the funniest outhouse blue room jokes I ever saw was it's like one of the last places you can go to the bathroom if you hopped in the plane to go home, and it says "Going home?" ? Ugly in 3, 2.
There's a whole book of that stuff. It's out there.
Was there?
Yeah. Someone beat us to the punch.
That was my first thing. Is I wanted
a coffee table book.
a coffee table book.
Hey man, thanks for coming on the show with us. Get a copy of Blackwater. Like Jay Moore, dear friend of the show. I put my name on that book, man. I love it. It's a great read. It's funny. You guys will be entertained. And I just want to say thanks for coming on the show, man. And best of luck with the book. And everything else.
Each book comes with a face punch guarantee. So if you don't like it, if you come find me, you can punch me in the face. I'm also working. There's a company we haven't launched yet, but it's called NutraHive. So NutraHive.com. It's CBD. There's a lot of stuff showing like CBD and cannabinoids, however you say that, help with PTSD. So try to get in that space and help veterans. So look out for that. It's going to be launching May 15th.
And Pete, we want to thank our gracious. Oh my God! No, we did. At Bastard Canteen. Go to Bastard Canteen on Instagram.
Bastards.
Big Calvin Spencer, always watching over us here at Bastard Canteen. You can go to County, California. You can find us here soon in Temecula, California. Bastards American Canteen. Find us on Instagram at Bastards Canteen, on Facebook at Bastards Canteen, and we're always online. Bastards Canteen, the Break It Down Show, ScottHuesing.com, Echo and Ramadi with SaveTheBrave.org. We are dedicated to connecting veterans who are struggling with post-traumatic stress through outreach programs. Go to SaveTheBrave.org today to donate because Pete is one of our longest and bestest supporters. So, Morgan, simplify.
What about that restaurant in Vegas? You guys have that opening up, right? Got to pimp
Another
that
show, yeah.
Fly pie.
We're on the road. Yeah.
Coming soon. Fly Pie on Instagram.